The Interstellar Academy's cafeteria hummed with the usual cacophony of 100 different species trying to navigate mealtime. Crystalline Vexians clinked their nutrient cubes against metal trays, while the gelatinous Morphids absorbed their sustenance through osmosis pools. In the corner, beneath the violet glow of the atmospheric regulators, Lena sat alone at her table, picking at her protein synthesizer output with visible distaste. She had been the first human admitted to the Academy in 3 cycles, a testament to her species' recent emergence onto the galactic stage. The instructors had been skeptical. Humans were such a young race, barely past their first faster-than-light drives, their culture still dripping with the barbarism of their isolated homeworld. But Lena had proven herself academically, scoring in the top percentile on the xenobiology assessments. Socially, however, was another matter entirely. Instructor Thexlar, a towering Krinth with 6 articulated limbs and compound eyes that could perceive 17 dimensions, observed from the monitoring station. His mandibles clicked in contemplation as he watched Lena push her food around the plate. The human had been increasingly withdrawn, a behavioral pattern that concerned the Academy's psychological algorithms. The human appears to be experiencing nutritional rejection, noted Instructor Velshaw, a wisp-like being of pure electromagnetic energy. Should we intervene? Protocol suggests observation, Thexlar replied. Human behavioral patterns remain largely unstudied. Premature intervention could contaminate our data. What the instructors didn't notice, what none of the sophisticated monitoring equipment flagged, was the small cluster of cubs watching Lena from 3 tables away. Arlo was a young Krinth, barely into his 4th molt, with soft chitin that still gleamed with the iridescence of youth. He sat with his clutchmates, but his primary eyes kept drifting toward the human. Over the past weeks, he had observed something the instructors had missed. Lena shared. It had started small. A dropped stylus that Lena retrieved for him without being asked. A complicated astrophysics equation that she explained patiently when his clutch teacher had been too busy. But most importantly, she had smiled at him, a peculiar human expression that involved baring teeth, which should have been threatening but somehow conveyed warmth instead. She's sad again. Arlo chittered to his clutchmate. Zixra, the human? Why do you care? Zixra's antennae twitched with adolescent indifference. Because, Arlo said slowly, watching Lena stare at her plate. When my sire died last cycle, she gave me half her sweetened carbohydrate bar. She said it was comfort food. Zixra's compound eyes swiveled. That's inefficient. Food is fuel. Maybe, Arlo replied, but it made me feel better. He made a decision then, one that would baffle xenopsychologists for years to come. Arlo skittered across the cafeteria floor, his small legs carrying him to the dispensary station. Using his limited credit allocation, he selected items carefully. A protein cube that he'd heard humans could metabolize, a carbohydrate synthesis that resembled something called bread, and even a small container of the rare, Earth-imported fruit preserve that cost him his entire week's allowance. When he returned to Lena's table, balancing the items precariously on his dorsal carapace, her eyes widened. Arlo, what are you doing? The young Krinth carefully transferred each item to her plate, his movements deliberate and gentle. You shared with me when I was sad. Now, I share with you. From the monitoring station, Instructor Thexlar's mandibles froze mid-click. Did that cub just give away his nutrients? Impossible. Velsha pulsed. Krinth cubs are hardwired for resource competition. It's fundamental to their survival instinct. But they watched, transfixed, as more cubs began to move. Zixra approached next, depositing a carefully wrapped thermal treat. Then came a young Morphid named Blorp, sliding across the floor to leave a perfectly spherical flavor capsule. A Vexian cub named Crystal Song shyly placed a glowing mineral supplement that was particularly expensive and rare. Within minutes, Lena's plate overflowed with offerings from a dozen different species, each cub depositing their contribution before quickly skittering, slithering, or floating away, though most lingered nearby, watching with whatever sensory organs they possessed. Lena stared at the pile of food, And then something extraordinary happened. Her eyes began to leak fluid, a response that triggered immediate alarm in the monitoring systems. Medical emergency, Thexlar barked. The human is experiencing optical fluid loss. But before the medical team could be dispatched, Lena did something even more confusing. She smiled. The biggest, brightest smile any of them had ever seen on the human's face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you all so much." She picked up a piece of the bread synthesis and took a bite, then gestured for the cubs to join her. "Come on. There's way too much here for just me. Let's share it together." The cubs needed no further invitation. They swarmed the table, and soon the quiet corner erupted with chittering, pulsing, and chiming the universal sounds of young beings enjoying a meal together. Up in the monitoring station, the instructors stood in stunned silence. "This behavior has no precedent," Velsha observed. "Cross-species resource sharing among juveniles, initiated without adult supervision or hierarchical pressure. The human didn't even ask for it," Thexlar added, his voice carrying a note of wonder. "The cubs simply cared. But why?" Another instructor asked. "What did the human do to trigger such a response?" They reviewed the footage, analyzing every interaction between Lena and the cubs over the preceding weeks. They watched her retrieve Arlo's dropped items, explain concepts patiently, offer her own food when she noticed others struggling. Small acts, insignificant by themselves. She treated them as individuals, Thexlar finally said, not as members of species or taxonomic classifications, but as persons. And they reciprocated, Velsha finished. Down in the cafeteria, Lena laughed a sound like crystalline bells as young Arlo attempted to explain the proper way to consume Crinth protein cubes, his tiny mandibles clicking enthusiastically. Around her, a rainbow of alien cubs crowded close, sharing not just food, but something far more precious: companionship. The instructors watched, their sophisticated instruments measuring brainwaves, hormonal responses, and social bonding indicators across multiple species. The data would keep xenopsychologists busy for decades, but perhaps the most important measurement was one that no instrument could capture. The simple truth that kindness, offered freely and without expectation, transcended the boundaries of biology, culture, and evolution. In the end, the cubs hadn't pulled food to Lena's plate because of some complex social algorithm or survival strategy. They had done it because she had shown them something their young minds could understand in any language. She had cared about them first. And sometimes, the most human thing of all is inspiring others to be more than they thought they could be.